Good day, everybody, and let's welcome Will to this new episode. What have we got today?
All right, Jessica, Donald Trump's Gaza plan, but from a totally different angle. We've got this analysis by an Egyptian author, Khaled Al-Bari, and get this. He is looking at Trump's whole approach through the lens of his book, The Art of the Deal.
Interesting.
Yeah, like, can those tactics actually work in international politics?
I'm intrigued. Where does the author even begin with that?
Well, he starts by laying out Trump's self-image, how he sees himself as this master deal-maker.
Yeah?
You know, the guy who prioritizes winning no matter what.
Okay, I can see that. But how does that translate to something as complex as the Gaza situation?
That's exactly the point the author makes. He says using those kind of business tactics in politics, it's like, and I love this analogy, it's like a skilled butcher who thinks he can be a surgeon.
Whoa, that's a pretty stark comparison. You're telling me he really frames it like that?
Yeah, it makes you think, right?
Yeah, because in business, you've got winners and losers. That's kind of how the game works. But in politics, it's not so simple.
Exactly. The stakes are so much higher.
Mm-hmm. Especially in this case, we're talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You've got all these different stakeholders, emotions, history. It's like a tangled web. You can't just go in with a bulldozer. So how does the author suggest Egypt should navigate this?
Well, he makes this interesting argument. He says, almost by accident, Trump actually handed Egypt a ton of leverage
Wait, really? How so?
by making them a key player in how this whole plan is supposed to work.
Okay, I'm not following. How does that give Egypt leverage?
Think about it. Egypt and Israel, they have that peace treaty, right? It's super important for the whole region. Not only that, Israel has lately focused on its northern borders and made gains there.
And that's something Israel can't really afford to risk.
The author puts it like this: the Gaza plan in one pan of the scale, and the peace gains of the Middle East in the other pan.
So even though it might not seem like it on the surface, Egypt actually holds a lot of power in this situation.
That's what the author is arguing. It's all about those historical agreements, those regional dependencies. But he also warns Egypt has to play this very carefully.
Meaning they can't just flat out reject the plan, right? It could backfire.
The author's suggestion on the humanitarian angle, specifically how this plan could lead to ethnic cleansing.
Oh, I see. That actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, framing it like that? It's way harder to justify.
Exactly. By using that term with all its historical weight, they can really put the pressure on.
It makes the US look bad internationally, right?
Absolutely. It taps into those deep sensitivities, both within Jewish and Christian communities. The author even suggests describing it as the modern-time Babylonian exile. Makes it a lot harder to defend.
It's not about military might or sanctions or anything like that. It's about taking a moral stand.
That's the strategy. And he goes further, suggesting Egypt should bring in other players like the Palestinians themselves, obviously, but also international organizations, European partners, anyone who might be sympathetic to the cause, to relieve itself from blame and limit its rejection to using its territories to displace Palestinians.
So they're not shouldering this burden alone. It becomes more of a collective effort.
Exactly.
So you've got these two key elements, right? First, Egypt taking a firm stance against accepting displaced Palestinians, and second, deflecting the whole matter to that broader coalition. And through all of this, they're positioning themselves as a force for peace.
And here's the twist. The author argues that Egypt could actually flip this pressure to its advantage.
Hold on. What did you say? I did not get that.
Basically, use the situation to push through new security and military deals with the US, the kind that normally wouldn't fly with public opinion. The idea is, in a high-stakes moment like this, people might be more willing to accept moves they'd usually reject.
That's going too far and dreamy, I guess.
Wait for this. He throws out a truly radical idea, almost like a thought experiment. What if, and I know this sounds crazy, what if What if Israel just annexed all the Palestinian territories?
Whoa, hold on. Like they'd be taking on all the Palestinians as citizens.
Exactly. Now, the author knows this is like super unlikely to happen, but it's meant to be this thought experiment, to kind of expose the flaws in Israel's current position.
Okay? I see where you're going with this. They don't accept the two-state solution. They don't accept a one-state solution.
Yeah, which kind of shows maybe they're not as committed to a real peace solution as they say they are.
It definitely makes you think so.
But knowing Trump, the author prefers to steer not to stand still.
I see. Couldn't you also argue that this unpredictability, it's kind of a strength? Like it keeps everyone guessing.
Maybe in some cases, but here it's more likely to just create more mistrust. Remember, everyone in this region, they're watching every single move.
So any misstep, any perceived aggression, it could just escalate things.
Exactly. The author's point is, Trump's so focused on just getting a deal done, on winning. He might be missing the bigger picture, like the long-term consequences. The author suggests maybe he just doesn't fully grasp how complex this conflict really is.
Exactly. And that's why this Egyptian perspective is so important. They've been a part of this region for centuries. They understand the nuances in a way that maybe an outsider just wouldn't. And they were the first country to sign a peace deal with Israel.
And the author suggests a pretty interesting strategy of shifting paradigms, like fundamentally changing the way we think about the whole conflict, those assumptions that are holding us back. And one of the biggest ones, it seems, is this idea that any solution has to start with like dividing up the land, trading this piece for that piece.
Yeah, it's all about territory. Territory.
That brings us to an interesting question. Why not start with peace first? The author asks. Instead of jumping straight into borders and land swaps, what if there was a declaration of intention for a two-state solution, but only after 8 or 10 years of stability?
That's an interesting shift. So instead of arguing over who gets what land right away, the focus is on keeping things calm first?
Exactly. During that time, Palestinians focus on improving their daily lives, education, infrastructure, economic growth, while regional development projects move forward. Meanwhile, they'd be governed by elected leaders, agreed upon by the Palestinian Authority, Israel, and the agreement's guarantors. The idea is, with a decade of stability and progress, the groundwork for a long-term solution might actually have a chance to take hold.
But of course, Israel is not exactly jumping at that idea, which kind of tells you something. It shows where their priorities really lie.
Neither are the Palestinians, most probably. But the author sees there is a good opportunity for such out-of-the-box idea, especially with Iran and its militia weakening, and more countries involved in peace with Israel.
It's a question worth asking. And even though it's probably never going to happen, just thinking about it like this opens up new possibilities. It makes you question all those assumptions we take for granted. Like, maybe the craziest ideas are the ones that can teach us the most.
It's like one of those optical illusions. You've got to look at it from a different angle to see the full picture.
So, if our listeners are taking away one thing from this whole conversation, what would it be?
I think it's this idea that there's not just one right answer. There are multiple ways to approach this problem. We tend to get stuck in our own little boxes, thinking this is the only way to do things, and that's where we stay stuck.
Thank you, Will. And for everyone listening, keep those conversations going, keep questioning, keep searching for those creative solutions, because sometimes the most unexpected approaches are the ones that make the biggest difference.